Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast, a proud member of the Heavy Hockey Network. I'm Devin Davidson, your host. With me, as always, Bruce Gunther.
Hello.
And joining us today, a special guest, Flip Livingstone, host of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast, senior writer for Dauber Hockey, and on-air talent and betting content for Pick Boss. Is that all correct, Flip?
You got it all, my friend. You got it all.
Excellent. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Today we're going through episode 120, Atlantic Division Fantasy Preview Part 1. We're going to talk about the Bruins, Sabres, Red Wings, and Panthers. Before we get into it, though, Flip, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of let our listeners know a bit about yourself, who you are, how long you've been doing this, and maybe where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate that. Yeah, I lifelong degenerate gambler and hockey fanatic. You know, I watch and cover a lot of different sports leagues, but the NHL and hockey is where my serious passion lies. I used to play hockey. Went back to school for sports journalism about a decade ago. I worked at The Score for a number of years covering the NHL, covering the league very closely, directly. And then since then, I've just been really grinding my way out, much like you guys. The podcast, I do betting coverage, and I also write for Dauber Hockey Fantasy-wise. I do a Saturday betting column for them as well. So yeah, my life really is pretty entrenched in the hockey content world, much like yourselves. And honestly, I'm very grateful to do what I do. So hopefully we can help some of the listeners out there make a little bit of money in their leagues this year.
Absolutely. That'd be great. And where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, you can check us out at the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and myself, you can check me out on X, Twitter, however we're calling it now, at @flips_picks. I like to throw out my bets and my predictions. So, yeah, I appreciate the plug, boys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I'm excited to have you on. Really like the stuff you guys are doing over at Locked On. And this should be actually an interesting episode. So the Bruins, Sabres, Red Wings, and Panthers all had different seasons for different reasons, and should be a fun episode. So before we jump into it, though, I just want to mention this episode is brought to you by Flaviar. Refine your palate with spirits from around the world. Sample and train your palate with curated tasting sets. Buy bottles at a discount and curate your home bar. Socialize, learn together with other members. Visit flaviar.com/FHH today to save 10% when you sign up for a subscription. Available to listeners in the United States, United Kingdom, and European Union. And with that, as we do each offseason, we're going to assess each division and team based on the results from the previous season, as well as any changes that were made as a result of the NHL entry draft and free agency. Starting with the Boston Bruins, who were a historic 65-12-5 last year, first in the Atlantic Division. Goals for 3.67 was second in the NHL. 2.12 goals against per game was first. Goals for 63.37 was first, and Corsi 4 was 13th at 51.41. Special teams, 22.22 was 12th in the NHL on the power play, and the PK was first at 87.28. They've got 15 back-to-back sets this season, tied for fifth most with 7 other clubs. 28% of the games are played on light days, tied for fourth among all teams in 2022, 2023, 2024. Key additions, James Van Riemsdyk, Milan Lucic, Kevin Shattenkirk. Key departures, Patrice Bergeron, Tyler Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, Garnet Hathaway, Nick Foligno, and Dmitry Orlov. Flip, I know the answer for me personally, but for you, did this team improve, get worse, or remain largely the same?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer right off the bat is this team obviously is going to take a step back this year. I've been predicting and banking on the decline of the Boston Bruins for a number of years, and I'm continuing to be proven wrong. Last year was a very good point of that, but to me, right away, we are forgetting about the addition of Morgan Geekie as well, which I think is actually perhaps their most intriguing fantasy piece in terms of new in the lineup coming up this year. So I think there's going to be a little bit of opportunity to be had up the middle for Morgan Geekie. But this team got a whole lot slower, and it got a whole lot older in the process. So I think in the uber competitive Atlantic Division that we know loaded up over the past couple of years, I think this Boston Bruins team is going to be in trouble to score goals and to keep up in terms of just foot pace and skating ability.
I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, it's funny because we all had commented I remember being on this podcast last summer, Bruce, saying the Boston Bruins are in trouble and missing the playoffs this year, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we all said. And it definitely, they didn't last long in the playoffs, but
they made it there.
They sure made it there, and they made one hell of a statement getting there, too.
They kind of gave us all the middle finger and said, watch this, hold my beer, right? So
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to be in tough this year. Losing Patrice Bergeron, we all know what that player meant to the organization.
Yeah.
I thought we've talked about this a bit already this summer, but losing Tyler Bertuzzi, I thought was tough because they had moved Taylor Hall to try and make that work, and it didn't. I think we knew Garnet Hathaway, Nick Foligno, and Dmitry Orlov were all going to be gone just for cap reasons, and that's what it is. But they really didn't. I mean, James Van Riemsdyk, I think, as an addition, can be helpful at times. He's not really he's not an elite level fantasy asset, but he could do something for you. And then Milan Lucic, I think he's at a point in his career where, other than hits and pims, are you really relying on that guy for anything?
Yeah, and
yeah,
Krejci
I think
retired too, right? Sorry,
go ahead, Bruce.
I think Krejci retired too. Did he not?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
he's gone.
Yeah,
He's gone too.
Yeah.
He's gone. The hole up the middle is obviously the most glaring. I think we are both, all three of us are comfortable sitting here with that Swayman Linus Ullmark tandem. Is Linus Ullmark going to run it back as the Vezina winner? I highly doubt that. But this is the Boston Bruins, and they sometimes and somehow always manage to still be relevant. I still think they're good enough to be a playoff bubble team. I think if I had to put money down on it, which is kind of what I like to do, I would predict them to just miss out on the playoffs, but they're very much going to be in that mix for one of those bubble wildcard spots. They just don't have the depth anymore, and I'm telling you, the Leafs, Red Wings, Ottawa, even Detroit and some of the other clubs they're going to skate past some of these lines. Milan Lucic cannot skate. Kevin Shattenkirk has had a great career. He cannot skate. And JVR, love the guy up front, power forward skills for sure. He can't skate, and that's going to be a problem for this team, I have a feeling.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Maybe let's start up the middle. So you mentioned that right away. We're looking at Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle as your top two centers in Boston, which is going to be problematic. Even if we're not paying attention to what's going on in the division, that is not a good position to be in. So let's start with Zacha. We've got him projected for 23 goals and 69 points, and a big part of that, I think, is just based on the deployment he's going to get. I think he's probably going to get top line and power play one. Or do you see that differently, Flip?
That's a tough one. I like that you guys are coming out with the tough questions right away. Pavel Zacha, I think we also have to remember, is one of those, he was a 6th overall draft pick that really hasn't panned out to that level of hype. Does that mean he still has the skill set to maybe bring that? Maybe it does, and I'm very intrigued to see if he can I know last year, 57 points, that's got to be a career high for him, just looking at it now. Mm-hmm. That is a career high for him, not even close to his previous career highs. So maybe this is a sign of things to come. I'm intrigued with Zacha. I like your projection in terms of points. It'll all come down to deployment, because the second that, Morgan Geekie or Charlie Coyle start to eat into those number one power play time or, his ice time in general, that's when I'd be concerned about drafting this player.
Yeah, I would agree, and I believe he was undrafted last year, if the information I found was correct. So I guess for me, it's going to be about where I can get him in the draft this year. If I can get him in the later rounds, I think it's worth taking a gamble on. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then Charlie Coyle, I didn't actually even give a projection for him, Bruce, but I don't know. Like, I'm just not that intrigued with Charlie Coyle. Now I guess he is going to play in the top 6. Whether it is the first or second line, he's going to have exposure to someone like Pasternak or maybe Marchand. So I think there's some value there, but again, just more of a depth option for me. For Flip, what do you think?
I tend to agree. Charlie Coyle is, though, one of those just very serviceable. He can play the wing as well. He brings a lot of value to the team's overall success, but that's one of those things I talk a lot about on our show is I sometimes have to separate those two things from your fantasy team success and what I think he actually brings on the ice if you're the coach and you're the franchise trying to build a winner. So there is obviously that, but at the end of the day, losing Patrice Bergeron, losing that balance of David Krejci, now this puts pressure on a guy like Coyle, who I don't know if he's ever in his career had to be that number 2 or even number 3. So that's where I'm a little bit concerned with Charlie Coyle, a guy who also usually tops out right at that 45, 40-point mark.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, you'd also mentioned Linus Ullmark and whether he's going to run that back for another Vezina. I'm going to put my neck out there and say, probably not.
Yeah.
I just think, he was incredible last year. Just 6 losses and 49 appearances, 1.89 goals against average and a .931 save percentage. He's just not going to replicate that again this year. I just don't think it's possible, right? So And actually, Bruce, we went in that in detail in one of our articles recently, or one of our podcasts, the 5 potential fantasy busts. So I'll put the link in the description here. But I think this is going to be a split in goal, like a 60-40 split, not quite 50-50. I think it's still Ullmark's to command for the most part. But Flip, how do you view that between Ullmark and Swayman for next year?
I think what you're saying totally makes sense. Headed into the season, this is the Vezina winner, and I don't think there's been many situations that the Vezina winner has come back and we're talking about a 60-40 split. I do, however, want to say that I think the crease is very much up for grabs if Jeremy Swayman can play how we know he can play, just because of what you had mentioned exactly. If Linus Ullmark struggles at all, they have no qualms giving that crease right to Swayman. He's proven that he can be basically a 1A, 1B situation. So I could actually see it shaking out to 60-40 in favor of Swayman if Linus Ullmark gets off to a rough start, because also think about everything else we are already discussing. Regression from the forward group, maybe less scoring. What does that mean? More heat on the goaltender, and if Linus Ullmark can't get it done, trust me, Swayman will be right in there to eat up those minutes.
Yeah, for sure he will. Yeah, I think shot suppression, goal suppression is going to be a problem for them. Like losing Dmitry Orlov was a big deal. I know they really wanted to keep him, but you can't keep the guy. So, and then
it wasn't.
Go ahead, Bruce.
It wasn't just Orlov they lost. There was a couple other defensemen that left too. I think
there was.
I can't remember if it was UFAs or in that, but there was a couple other defensemen that left too. So there's definitely going to be some change back there.
Mike Riley was one guy they had lost, serviceable defenseman there.
And Grzelcyk too, I think, left too. Did he not?
No, Grzelcyk's still there. Is he not?
Is he still there?
Should be back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, there's question marks for sure. And then just looking at some of the regression, the underlying luck metrics for Ullmark, he had a 900 PK save percentage. So that's something that you just know is going to regress back to 860. That in itself is going to influence his overall numbers. Just about like, talking about Dauber and the quality start percentage, 86% last year.
There you go.
Flip, do you recall another goaltender had an 86% quality start percentage?
I do not, but I also don't remember a historically good season from the group around the goaltender as well. So maybe some of those numbers are sometimes tied to how good the team was in front of him and not so much the goaltenders. But I'm really not trying to take away from a guy who had a historically good season. I just honestly, I've been wrong in the past a couple of times and I've been called out on the internet for it. It just makes so much sense this year that the Bruins regress. And I know you guys want to talk to me a little bit about my predictions for trophies, and one of them was the Rocket Richard. I looked long and hard at David Pasternak for the Rocket Richard because he just is that good. But when you talk about all the stats that we just mentioned, all the players that they've lost, it just doesn't make sense for me to want to risk it on a guy who's, lost his homie in Patrice Bergeron. So I've got another name for you for the Rocket later on in the show. Okay. I just think overall the quality around them in the Atlantic, and I'm assuming we'll get to some of these teams soon, it's just going to be a little bit too much for this group to handle, in my opinion. But we are very close to the puck drop, and we will be soon seeing with our own two eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to ask you quickly. So, from a fantasy perspective, how are you approaching the goaltending situation here? Are you going to try and handcuff Ullmark with Swayman? Are you avoiding the tandem altogether? What's your approach going to be with them next season?
I think you're going to have the classic case of, there's a lot of GMs that don't dig into the trenches. They don't listen to this podcast, which is a really good idea. And they just don't do their research, right? They look at the numbers. They see the flashy goals or the flashy stats. They see a Vezina winner. Linus Ullmark is going to be at the top of a lot of lists, in that top 10, top 15 for sure. And they might reach. They might take Linus Ullmark too early. So how I'm looking at this Boston tandem is if I can get Linus Ullmark maybe down the draft board a little bit, and I really do. I'm starting to employ, a good friend of mine and guest on the show, Michael Amato of goaliepost.com, really adheres to the draft strategy of unless you're getting one of the top couple of guys in Sorokin, Vasilevsky, maybe Shesterkin, you can really wait on your goaltenders and wait until some of the, maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th rounds to get some good goalies. And I think that's where I would be looking at Ullmark and Swayman. And honestly, given what I just said about my thoughts about Swayman potentially taking the crease, I might wait even longer, run my risk on Swayman as maybe my 2nd or 3rd goalie, and hope that he does take that crease. That's how I'm really looking at it.
I wonder if, so we talked about this previously. I was able to get Linus Ullmark with my last pick in the draft last season.
Wow.
Yeah, just an absolute steal, and that worked out really well for me. Bruce, I wonder if this year the roles kind of reverse, and Swayman is a really late round pick, and maybe as you're saying, Flip, he kind of comes in and cleans up, and maybe by the end of the season, it's Swayman that's starting, and people got a really great deal on Swayman in the drafts.
Oh, it's going to be very possible. There, like Flip said, there's going to be lots of people that I bet you in drafts, Allmark will be the first goalie that goes before Sorokin or anybody else. There's going to be lots of them. Like you said, they're going to look at that and say, holy crap, I need that goalie. And yeah, he's just not going to, I don't think he's going to be able to do it.
Okay. You talked about Pasternak. Let's maybe jump a bit here up to the forwards to talk about some wingers here. His ADP last year on average is 26, which I mean seems kind of crazy. I'm not sure if that number is accurate. Like I feel like he is a first round pick, is he not?
If someone's taking him, I don't know how that number went to 26. David Pasternak is for sure a bona fide first round draft pick, in my opinion, even with this team regressing. He was only 2 goals off of McDavid last year for the Rocket. Let's not forget that. I believe he had 61 and McDavid had something like 63.
Yeah.
Wait. Sorry. McDavid had 64. Pasternak had 61.
Yeah.
That right there, knowing how historically good Connor McDavid was last year, and Pasternak was only 3 goals off, this man is definitely a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, no question. I love Pasternak, and one thing I look for in my players when I draft is shot volume, shot rate, right? And Pasternak, last year a career high 15.2 shots on goal per 60, just under 5 shots on goal per game. But I don't know if he can replicate that again for this upcoming season. So again, you've lost some of your running mates, as you had alluded to, with Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci's gone. And I mean, both great playmakers, right? Guys who are going to pass him the puck and put him in open space to get those shots off. And his 3-year average is 13.99 shots on goal per 60. So maybe we see a bit of a dip there in shot rate. But we're still projecting, Bruce, David Pasternak for 51 goals and 98 points. Flip, does that seem reasonable?
It does seem reasonable, and honestly, like if I were to throw out a number for Pasternak in terms of goals, I might actually say that's slightly under what I expect. And all of the stats and all of what you're saying totally lines up. This is just more of a gut instinct. I just think he's good enough to actually crank this into another gear and understand that he really is the guy now.
Yeah.
Bergeron is gone. This is his team, maybe him and Marchand up front. But he is the guy now, most definitely the number one. He's going to have to lead on and off the ice. And I think he's good enough to shift gears and actually take his game up one more notch. I know he's already right up there. He's run out of notches right now, but he is good enough. I'm saying 55 to 60 goals is still uncomfortable in that realm, but you're not far off with 51. This is one of those things. We could sit here and talk about difference in goal projections and numbers all day long. 50 plus. He's that good, and I think he gets it for sure.
Yep. And I think, too, he could crack 100 points as well. I mean, I've got him coming down a little bit based on his secondary assists per 60. That makes sense. That was a bit high. So I think it was 8 secondary assists year over year was the difference from last year. So there'd be some regression for him. And like I said, just the line mates around him. But I still really like this player for next year. Like you said, he's a first-round pick.
100%.
You mentioned Brad Marchand, so let's talk about him. One thing I was actually reading about this morning, and it's really interesting. He's kind of had the past 2 seasons. He's been really good in the first half of the season and not so good in the second half of the season. Flip, do you buy that some of that is just due to age-related decline? And as you're going through a season, he's 35 years old. I'm 35 years old. I mean, I get it, man. Things start to creak, right? So I'm not playing in the NHL. I don't blame him for getting a little bit tired in the second half of the season. What do you think?
I threw my back out sneezing the other day, Devin. So, I'm 35 as well. Here's the thing with Brad Marchand. He has also had a lot of mileage on that body, right? 947 career games played in the regular season.
Yep.
But this Boston Bruins team has been perennially good in the postseason. So there's all those postseason games on his body as well. And all 3 of us know, this is not a guy who plays on the peripherals of the game.
No.
He mixes it up. He is throwing his body all over the place. So it's a real thing to consider. Age decline, of course, injuries. These all play into what you're doing in terms of scouting your players for your drafts. At the end of the day, though, I'm always going to take the best player available. That's my opinion. That's my strategy. And I think Brad Marchand, if he can stay in the lineup, he just brings a little bit of everything. And I know, he's still got 81 hits. The body is taking some toll. he still had 74 points last year, and in my opinion, he is still very fantasy relevant.
Yeah, the projection for us is 32 goals and 80 points. I think he'll be just under that points per game mark. Actually, last year was the first season he was below a point per game. I can't remember how many years, but since 2015, 2016, I think. So it's been a long time for him. But like you said, he's got a lot of miles on that body and coming back from double hip surgery. And he came back 5 weeks early, too, which was shocking to everyone.
Yeah.
So,
I think you had in the notes, Devin, that you're looking to fade this player, and I think I have to agree with you. I think you really have to be careful. It just goes in line with everything that we've already discussed, right? So you're lining up the season, you're lining up the division has gotten better. We're having a look at some of these pieces that have moved on, and then you factor in his injuries, surgeries, and toll on the body. You just have to be careful. We're talking about reaching. Do not overreach, because some of these names, right? Brad Marchand, these are sexy names,
sure,
but they're starting to lose some of that sheen. Whereas if you take a look at maybe some of the Morgan Geekies of the world on the come up, that's a big boy. That's a guy who's going to get a lot of opportunity. Am I saying he gets 80 points? Absolutely not. But on the keeper dynasty side of things, you might want to be taking a deeper look at some of these younger pieces instead of mans coming off of double hip surgery who have played 1,000+ games over the last number of seasons.
Yeah. One player I'm actually quite bullish on for next season is Jake DeBrusk. So speaking of younger players, I think this is a player that hasn't really been given the optimal deployment to perform to date, right? So last year,
good point.
Career best 50 points and 27 goals, but he still played under 17 minutes a game and had 53% power play share. So there's not really a lot of options in Boston next year. And I think if he gets power play one, if he plays on the top line with Zaka and with Marchand, he's going to get exposure to Pasternak on the power play. I'm projecting him here for 34 goals and 61 points. Is that a little too bullish, or do you think that's in the range of possibilities?
I think it's most definitely in the range of possibility. And I think you really mentioned the key factor here with DeBrusk is it's that time on ice. Over his career, he's still leveling off at 15, just over 15 minutes. And last year, he's up to almost 17. I think he has the skills and he has the longevity to be playing 18, 19 minutes a night. And I think you're going to see that with him. A lot of upside, a lot to like with Jake DeBrusk. And really, it ties to that ability for him to form some chemistry on that top power play unit with David Pasternak. If they can go off, if they can really maybe get some more time together because of the holes that are now in that lineup, that's where I'm going to be keeping my eyes on, because if for some reason Jake DeBrusk doesn't get drafted in your league, maybe it's a really shallow league of only a few GMs, and for some reason he gets left off the board, I don't know, there's not a lot of slots in your roster, I'm going to the waiver wire right off the jump if he's forming any kind of chemistry on that power play unit, and I'm grabbing Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, no question. And Bruce, close your ears here, but I'm going to be targeting DeBrusk in later rounds of the draft. So, because I don't believe he was drafted on average last year. So, this is a player I think there's a lot of value to be had there in drafts. And where I think the biggest improvement's going to come for him, though, is on the power play. He had a career best 47 shots with the man advantage last year, but his power play shooting percentage was down to 12.7%. His career average on the power play is 18.4%. So with a full season on the power play, if he gets back to his career average, I mean, I can see 12-plus power play goals and 20-plus power play points.
I totally agree. I know his size is he's only 6 foot. I think if he had a couple of more inches on him, this is the kind of guy that I would look to as kind of like a prototypical power forward. 85 hits last year. I don't hate the peripherals that he brings to the table as well. So I think this is just one of those teams that's in one of those changing of the guard moments, which makes me a little bit wary of where I project some of these pieces. Whereas if you're looking at other teams, like I'm excited to mention some of my predictions later in the show. Some of these teams out west, like even I'm seeing we're sitting in the Oilers dressing room here. The Edmonton Oilers, I'm much more confident in speaking about where that team is headed. We know that they're going to be a cup threat, whereas I just can't really put my finger on the Boston Bruins right now, and that obviously has to do with major faces of this franchise no longer being in this lineup.
Yeah. Okay, last thing here on the Boston Bruins, Charlie McAvoy. He took a bit of a step back in terms of time on ice last year. He didn't even get 22 and a half minutes, and some of that was even strength, some of that was power play. Do you think he gets back to 24 minutes a game and 65% plus power play share?
I think the power play share, I could see it. I'm because there is just going to be that opportunity that they're going to need to fill with somebody. McAvoy is a very intriguing piece to me. I love the way he plays the game. 52 points last year, 54 penalty minutes, 105 shots on net, though. This is where I need to see this guy shoot the puck more.
For sure.
He's an offensive-minded player. Why is he only shooting the puck 105 times? And I think if you see that number go up this year, it's just going to continue to affect the rest of his offensive numbers. This isn't a hot take, but I think he just needs to shoot that puck a lot more. And I think some of it has to do with his confidence and his feel for the game. And I think that stems from injuries, taking him out of the lineup at a number of points over the last couple of years. That messes with a guy's mojo. I think a full season, hopefully healthy coming in. That's what it sounds like for McAvoy. I think it's safe to say that a lot of those key metrics go up for McAvoy this year. And I think I'm actually going to be taking a little bit of a risk on McAvoy to get him on my team, because I do think he's set for a comeback of sorts.
Yep, I would agree. I think our projection is 9 goals and 59 points, which would put him back on pace with what he did in 2021, 2022. So
there you go.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right, let's move on to the Buffalo Sabres here. 42, 33, and 7. They were 5th in the Atlantic. They missed the playoffs by 1 point. Absolutely brutal, which is crazy because the Florida Panthers, which we'll talk about a little bit here, made the playoffs and went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So just funny how the world works.
Very much so.
Goals for per game, 3.57, put them 3rd overall. 3.62 goals against per game was 26th. And as Mike McLaughlin from Left Wing Lock stated in his draft kit, these guys are a high event team. So lots of shots for, lots of shots against.
Right.
Corsi for was 16th at 51.01, and special teams, they were 9th in the power play at 23.42% and 28th on the penalty kill at 73.01. They've got 12 back-to-back sets this season, tied for 5th most with Boston and Chicago. 37% of their games are played on light days where fewer than 50% of teams are in action. The 7th most among all NHL clubs this upcoming season. Key additions were Eric Johnson, key departures, Vinny Hinostroza. Flip for you, did this team improve, decline, or largely stay the same?
This is a tricky one for me because right off the jump, I immediately just want to say they got better, but I think it has nothing to do with, Eric Johnson coming in or Vinny Hinostroza leaving them. Yeah. This is just the improvement of a really, really good young core of players. And I'm talking about Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin. Now they have a goalie in Levi. I'm really, really interested to have a look at what he brings to the table. By the way, he's paying plus 2,000 for the Calder Trophy, which is, I know we're going to talk about that. Buffalo Sabres have a good year. Levi is going to be in the mix for that Calder Trophy. And I'll say this team did get better because the likes of Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Dylan Cousins, JJ Paterka, Peyton Krebs, all of these guys now have another full year under their belt, and they've now all played together for a full season. And I think, and here I go with the predictions. I expect to see this Buffalo team to be a real threat for the postseason, and it all comes down to the back end. That's not a bold take, but up front, this is one of those teams that I'm happy to continue to go back to as draft choices to fill up my offensive roster, because I think they're going to do what they did last year and score a ton of goals. Only the Edmonton Oilers and Boston Bruins scored more goals total last year than the Buffalo Sabres, and that's something we need to pay attention to.
It's definitely, it's crazy. They're like, I wouldn't have guessed 2 years ago that this would be an exciting, fun team to watch, right? But you look,
very fun.
I think Elite Prospects has them as the top ranked prospect pool in the NHL right now.
Makes sense.
They've got tons going on, right? I mean, the back end, like you said, we love all those players there. Let's talk about Devin Levi, because at plus 2,000, I love it. I might actually have to put a little sprinkle on that, as Tyler would say, hey, Bruce.
Thank you.
No, I really like it. So I want to get your opinion. Do you think, is this a guy, like, is it going to be a 50% net share? That's how I've put this for now, because as much as I think Levi should get the first shot at it, UPL has been serviceable at times, and we just really don't know how it's going to shake out. So what's your prediction for how that tandem looks?
Two goalies with very minimal track record in the NHL. Two goalies that, yes, of course, they, especially Levi, I would say, had flashes of really showing that he has what it takes to be a number one. UPL at times looking like he was doing the Peter Mrazek backstroke in there, looking like he was fighting the puck, but he's a young goaltender as well. So to sit here and predict what it's going to shake out to with two guys that have really not played in the NHL very much is a really hard thing to do, but I can't help but feel they really want this crease to go to Levi.
Yeah.
I just don't know if that happens right away. Again, that Atlantic Division, yeah, of course the Sabres are going to score goals, but they also got to keep the puck out of their own net if they want to win games.
That's right.
So I think it might actually be a tricky season to put too much stock into either goaltender before we see what they can do. With that said, though, I definitely will probably take a risk on Devin Levi if he's around.
1,000%. He is a boomer bust pick for me. Like this guy, if all goes well, could really help you win your league. Like let's say everything shakes out the way you hope it will. We just saw Stuart Skinner at Edmonton post 29 wins, right? And Edmonton's not the most defensive-minded team either. So
no,
it can happen, right? And Devin Levi, I think, even has more pedigree than a guy like Stuart Skinner. So
I totally agree. And look, I mentioned, I know we'll get to the trophies at the end of the episode. Connor Bedard makes sense as the heavy favorite. But then you got Luke Hughes, Logan Cooley, Shane Wright, and Matt Nyes. And then you have Devin Levi at plus 2,000. If this Sabres team ends up being a postseason club, which we think they very much have the ability to do that means Devin Levi has had a pretty good season for the most part. And that means he will be in the mix for that trophy.
Yeah. No question. Bruce, cover yours again. I'll be looking at Devin Levi late in drafts.
You.
Got to remember they've got Comrie signed for another year too, so we can't forget about him. He's gonna factor in there somewhere.
Yeah, he hasn't been great though. Like the one thing about Eric Comrie, 332 goals against average, an 897 save percentage, and 47 career starts. Again, a guy who doesn't have a huge sample size, but to me, he just seems like the third option here. Bruce, what do you think?
It could very well be. The other thing, because right now I think I'm trying to see here. I think Levi is the only one with what do they call that? Waiver. So he can go down. He's waivers exempt.
Right.
Where UPL and Comrie aren't. So that may work against Levi at the beginning of the season. They're going to have to send somebody down. I don't think they're going to want to give up on Comrie because they've got nothing behind Levi down to bring up anywhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I think at the beginning of the season, Levi could be the odd guy out and end up down in the AHL for a bit. But yeah, if either one of those two struggle, I don't think they'll hesitate too much to bring Levi up and put him to work.
Now, it's a limited sample size, but in 7 games, he had 5 quality starts with save percentages ranging from 912 to 944. So, I mean, he did, in a very small sample size, perform quite well. But that's just a gamble I'm willing to take. And like I said, I'll be putting some of my own money down for the Calder Trophy. So we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the defense here quickly. So Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power. I think Rasmus. I'm a big fan of Rasmus Dahlin, especially if you're in a bangers league. If you're in a bash sort of setup. He had a combined 442 shots on goal, hits, and blocked shots. He was right in there. I think he was top 15, I believe, in terms of those categories. So I've got him projected here, Flip, for 16 goals and 76 points. Does that seem reasonable to you?
I think it's more than reasonable. I'm very high on this player. Again, first overall draft pick who took a couple of years to really blossom into what we thought he could be. I think, 44 points, 40 points, 53 points over those first few years was slightly disappointing given all the hype around this guy. And then he just blows the doors off the league last year. 132 block shots, 105 hits, 73 points. He's starting to really find his confidence at the NHL level, and I think that's a scary thing for offensive players around this division because he can throw that body, and he's bringing the offense of 70-plus points. Maybe it is a bit of a bold prediction to think he's going right back to that 70-point level, but I think he has all the skills in the world to do it, and let's not forget, he's going to be on the top power play with a lot of stud offensive pieces. And this team, say what you will about the back end and the goals in their own net, they'll be putting the puck in the opponent's net a whole lot. And I could honestly see this team leading the league in goal scoring.
Yeah, for sure. Lots to like about Rasmus Dahlin. And actually, Tyler Holman, who's not here today, on an episode previously suggested that Dahlin may just be a Norris Trophy candidate this season. What do you think?
Norris Trophy candidate, most definitely, and Vegas would actually agree with you because he's the third favorite after Cale Makar and Adam Fox at plus 750. There is another D-man, though, that I'm looking at that is also plus 750 that I won't give away all my award picks until the end of the show, but I'll save one. But why
Okay.
not? Rasmus Dahlin brings all the pieces. It's just, again, that plus minus. Can he help keep the pucks out of that area? That will be the question, because we know he can bring the hits. We know he can skate that blue line and run the power play. But let's see what he can do about maybe tightening up that defensive end of his game.
For sure. So what does that mean for Owen Power then? Like, if you're in a dynasty or a keeper league, even in season-long redraft leagues, how do you look at Owen Power? I know I've actually got him. I'm in a league with Victor and Dynasty League, and I've got Owen Power on my roster. His ceiling has to be capped at this point based on the fact that Dahlin's not going anywhere anytime soon.
It's an interesting one for sure. I think it's actually a really good problem for the Buffalo Sabres to have here. Two number one stud defensemen who, Owen Power, 35 points last year, 79 games. I want to say a guy who's 6'6", 215 plus pounds with the skill set that he has, that those numbers should go way up. I just don't know how much he will get deployed in the places that we really want him to be. And I know the Buffalo Sabres are balanced, but we'd love to see him on that top power play unit. I don't know if he's going to get that deployment. That's a big question mark for me, because we know it's probably going to be 4 forwards and Dahlin. So that leaves him to the second unit, which obviously isn't as sexy. But I'm comfortable taking Owen Power as a very draftable D-man who has about 40 to 50 points. I'm comfortable with that kind of projection.
Yeah, we've got him at seven goals and 46 points.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, not
Love
a huge jump, but okay. My buddy Ryan really loves JJ Peterka. Maybe tell our listeners a bit about Peterka from your point of view. We've got him at 19 goals and 47 points. I think with Jack Quinn being shelved, I think, is it for the season or I can't remember the timeline on him, but he's out for a while anyway. So opportunity for Peterka here.
He will be out, and I think what we've seen from Peterka, and again, we're talking about predictions for good situations. That's what we're kind of banking on. This is a guy with only 79 career games played in the NHL. He's only 21 years old, and he's not going to be turning 22 until mid-season. So this is a young pup. And I think what's the most intriguing about this is, so last year, 77 games, he scores 32 points. Okay. But he got that done in under 14 minutes of ice time. I don't know how many players out there in the NHL played 13 minutes a night and was still able to produce over 30 points. So that's where the intrigue lies for me, because I think his ceiling is quite high. But here's the problem. We just talked about how balanced and how stacked this group is up front. So how many minutes is he really going to get when the likes of Tage Thompson, Skinner, Tuck, Olofsson, I really like Dylan Cousins a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players on this team that are going to be eating into those minutes. I'd just be very wary of taking this player. I don't know if he's draftable in my opinion, but this is how I'm looking at Peterka. Keeper dynasty, I'm drafting him for sure because I like where his career is headed. He might be a nice little stash spot as a final draft pick that you want to be a keeper. But I'll say this, he's one of those guys that if he has a hot start, I'm going to be having him on my watch list, because if he does get some uptick in minutes and opportunity in that top 6, he definitely is a must-add piece.
Yeah, agreed. Our projection here is based on 17 minutes time on ice. So, I mean, that might be a big ask, but I think it can happen given that Quinn is out. And two, I mean, Olofsson, he struggled last year. He's and I think his ice time he was around 14 and a half or 15 minutes. So it almost seems like the Sabres maybe value Peterka a little bit more. That's just me speculating, but that's kind of what we do here in fantasy. So,
hey, and the left side is definitely the side to try and make something happen in the Buffalo Sabres. I think Alex Tuck and Middlestat are kind of set as those two right wingers that they have going in the top 6. Whereas, hey, Jeff Skinner, he had a great year, but I think they really don't care who plays where. If Peterka's going off, he will move up that lineup. That's a fact.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's a nice segue, Jeff Skinner. So let's talk about him a little bit, because he's been a bit of a polarizing player in some people's eyes. I mean, he can be great at times and he can disappear, but he did manage to post career highs in points with 82, power play points with 21. Had a great year, but some of that was for sure influenced by luck. So we had a 12.1 team even strength shooting percentage with him on the ice, well above the league average of 8.75. His individual shooting percentage at 14.5% was the second highest of his career. That was well above his 3-year average of 12.2% and his career average of 11.2. So there's some things there, and I think his secondary assist rate per 60 was high as well. So there's some things that I would just be keeping an eye on. I don't have super high expectations for Jeff Skinner. Like you said, if he does fall off a bit, we've seen in the past in Carolina and other places where he all of a sudden he's on third line duty and he kind of gets stuck in the doghouse.
Very streaky player, Jeff Skinner. You know, when he's hot, he's hot. When he's on it, he's, highlight real goals, real good hand-eye, very smart player, but no peripherals. You know, he doesn't bring any of those hits. He doesn't bring block shots. And, of course, you're not drafting Jeff Skinner to throw his body around, but it's one of those things that you're drafting a guy purely for offense. Be very careful of where you're taking him, because if he goes on a cold streak, like let's even say 1 or 2 weeks, he ain't hitting 80 points. And it might be much closer to 60 points. And now you have a guy with 60 points, no peripherals. And if you took him too high, those are one of those situations that if you're looking at the standings in your league and you have too many of those on your roster, guaranteed you're not in the top 3.
Well, you read my mind. So our projection here for Jeff Skinner is 31 goals and 68 points. I think he still obviously starts the season on that top line with Thompson and
Agreed.
with Tuck. But if he falls asleep with the whale, he won't be there for long.
Totally agree. I think that one's spot on.
Okay.
Too much talent.
Yeah. They're going to be fun to watch next year.
Guaranteed.
I, too, love Dylan Cousins, so I want to talk about him. Obviously, he garnered lots of attention in season-long drafts, or he should garner lots of attention in season-long drafts after posting 68 points in 81 games last year. 201 games played, so he's entering his 4th NHL season. As you know, that 200 games played is sort of the breakout threshold for Dauber hockey. Now, not to say that he's going to progress linearly. That doesn't always happen in player development, but what do you think of this player for next year? I think like 32 goals and 70 points is where we've got him. I think a lot of things maybe need to go right for that to happen, but really like Dylan Cousins.
The workhorse from Whitehorse is one of the best nicknames in the business, and he's earned it. He has had that moniker on him since junior hockey. He's also gotten it done at every level of his career that he's a gamer. Dylan Cousins is the kind of guy that you want on the ice in the clutch moments. I was high on this player for a long time. One of our first episodes that I did 2 years ago, we had players to watch under 22 in the NHL, and he was 5th on my list. My co-host chirped me, so many other players to look at, and I said, well, let's circle back and remember this one. It's how he plays the game. Dylan Cousins knows how to play the game at all ends of the ice. And the fact that now he's figuring it out offensively, you're going to be hearing this guy's name for many years to come in the NHL. He's got first-line center of capability all day long, in my opinion. Obviously not on this team when you have the likes of Tage Thompsons and others. But he is an absolute stud, in my opinion. And actually, I think you're a little shortchanging him just a little bit. I know a lot of things will have to go right. That's just how high I am on his skill set and his ability. Very high hockey IQ, smart player. And now he's got the benefit of settling in with this roster. The same thing, though, goes for their opponents. They know this. They know the Buffalo Sabres are now going to be bringing it offensively. No one's sleeping on Dylan Cousins anymore, so I hear what you're saying totally. I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit of a bold prediction. I'm going to say 75-plus points for Dylan Cousins, and I'm going to see those peripheral assists, I think, go up with the J.J. Peterkas, with another year with Casey Middlestat. Maybe he gets even more power play 1 deployment. Let's see what happens there. But I'm really, really high on this player, and I hope none of my competition is listening because I'm going after Dylan Cousins full steam ahead this year.
Love it. I actually do have that player on my Dynasty roster as well, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. Yeah. Okay, you mentioned Tage Thompson. I mean, I think we can't talk about the Buffalo Sabres without talking about Tage Thompson. Talk to me, Flip, because this is a guy that when they made that trade, I was like, Eichel, and you got Thompson, and like, what is happening right now? Like, this just doesn't seem like, but right now, it looks like Buffalo made out like bandits.
Most definitely. I love Alex Tuck. The Eichel trade ended up working out for both sides. Peyton Krebs is a name that is also very intriguing in the keeper dynasty realm. He was an absolute star in the Western Hockey League. He's a goal-scoring stud in those levels. But Tage Thompson, let's not forget, over the first 106 games in the NHL, he had 10 goals. So he has come out of nowhere, but I don't think that's actually taking anything away from him because now he's here to stay. And some of the moves and some of the ability that he was able, the guy can stick handle in a phone booth, and he's my height. I'm 6'6", and I can barely hold a fork and knife at the dinner table most nights. And the fact that he can do that with that size is one of those rarities in the game of NHL that if he's able to continue to put it together, this man is going to be a force to be reckoned with. And 94 points, that's a big season. He was also 14th in Hart Trophy voting, 295 shots, and I think where it ties for me, he's got to continue to shoot that biscuit.
Yeah.
295 shots, I'm fine with it, but fire it even more. He's got a lethal, sneaky shot, the size in front of the net. There is so much to like about Tage Thompson, and I think it's one of those polarizing conversations is he a first-round draft pick? A lot of leagues would probably say yes. Some might say no, but it's a very interesting conversation to have.
Well, he's right there. So last year, his average ADP was 110, which is crazy looking back. But
that's insane.
Right now, I think in Yahoo, he's ranked 15th overall. So he's right there at the turn in the first round. I wouldn't blame anyone if they decided they're going to take a gamble on Tage Thompson in the first round. Mm-hmm. I think that's totally fine. And part of my reasoning for that is that his shot rate was elite last year. Like you said, 12.3 shots on goal per 60, put him 7th at all strengths, just under 4 shots on goal per game. So he basically 40 goals is his floor. If he can maintain that shot deployment and hopefully his efficiency stays roughly where it is. Like it was a career high at 15.8%. Does that repeat? Even if he gets down to his career average of 12.7%, he's scoring 40 goals again. Like it's going to happen. So,
and I'm giving some of these guys their flowers. One of my favorite pieces that I have mined on my keeper dynasty, I took him a couple of years back. Guys were looking at me. Alex Tuch is a huge reason why Tage Thompson was able to do what he did last year offensively. He is speaking of smart players, the Buffalo Sabres are racking him up with regularity here, and pretty soon that's going to translate into success. So Alex Tuch playing with Tage Thompson, it's an elite combination that's already proven to be very effective offensively. They're just a very balanced team now up front with a bunch of different wrinkles that they can throw out. And that allows Tuch and Thompson to play very well off each other. And I think you're going to see it again this year. And Alex Tuch is also another player I absolutely love.
So just really quickly, I do have some reservations just in terms of the luck metrics, I think, for both players, just for the Buffalo Sabres in general. Like they did score a few goals and collected a few points that maybe they won't this year. So for Tage Thompson, I've got him taking just a little bit of a dip at 46 goals and 92 points. Or do you see it differently? Do you think he could go off for 50 and 100?
I think given what I kind of alluded to, that there's no more sneaking up with Tage Thompson, it's also kind of how I'm looking at the Florida Panthers overall. They're not going to be slept on anymore. They're not going to be rolling through teams with regularity in the postseason like they did, and that's not taking anything away from them at all. They're just going to have that target on their back, and I think Tage Thompson, guys pay attention. Guys going out there and scoring at will like he did, flashy goals. Defensemen and goaltenders are taking note when things happen like that because they don't want to be on the highlight reels and they don't want to get embarrassed. This is a professional league, and these guys take this very seriously, and I think that aligns with what you're saying. And I actually would prefer to I'd be very comfortable taking Tage Thompson in the first round, but I'd feel a whole lot better if it was the second.
Yeah, definitely better value if you can get him in the second round for sure.
Yep. So I'm with you. I agree.
Okay. And then Alex Tuch, 32 goals, 79 points. What do you think?
So he had 79 points last year, I believe. So I like it. I think he could be, and to me, getting 80 points out of a guy like Alex Tuch, because he isn't a flashy name, he is going to be out there in a lot of leagues for you to take it a very good round. Yes, dedicated leagues. Okay, keeper dynasties, he's definitely a keeper. He's not going to be out there. But in some of those leagues that I'm telling you, if you do listen to these podcasts and you are doing your research at this time of year, Alex Tuch will be out there for you at a very good round, and I think he is still going to be a very effective piece. 75, 80 points is exactly where I would project him.
All right, perfect. Let's move on to the Detroit Red Wings then, who were 35, 37, and 10, 7th in the Atlantic last season. 2.89 goals for per game was 24th. 3.35 goals against per game was 22nd. Corsi for 47.13 is 25th. Special teams, they were 17th on the power play at 21.11%, and on the penalty kill, 78.31%, 18th. They have 10 back-to-back sets this season, tied for 4th fewest among all NHL clubs. 33% of the games are played on light days, the 8th lowest for next season. Obviously, bringing some key additions to help with that power play are Alex DeBrincat, Daniel Sprong, JT Compher, Klim Kostin, Shane Gostisbehere, James Reimer. Key departures were Dominic Kubalik, Philip Zadina, Robert Hagg, and Alex Nedeljkovic. Flip, do you like the moves they made this offseason? Did they get better? Did they stay the same or not really?
This is a very, very busy front office in Detroit. And, on paper, looking at the names that they brought in, of course, DeBrincat you love. I actually really like the bottom 6 moves that they made the most. Klim Kostin and Daniel Sprung are going to make this team a very difficult one to play against. And I think what they've done nicely is balanced out the big offensive gun up front that they have not had before. They bring in a good Michigan boy into DeBrincat to play with Larkin and Raymond. And that's one of the trios that actually I'm looking at to really explode this year. But I think what they've done is bringing in Sprung and Klim Kostin. Not only do they still bring a little bit of offensive value, they're going to bring that grit to allow that top line to get the space that they need to do their thing. So on paper, they definitely got better. But looking at all those names you've reeled off, how many players did they bring in there? That's 7 or 8 new guys. Chemistry could be a factor. Not just adding players and throwing them into that locker room and throwing them out on the ice doesn't always translate to success. So fantasy-wise, I think they definitely got a whole lot better, but it comes down to, can Ville Husso be a number 1 goaltender and hold it down? Because James Reimer ain't a number 1 anymore, and as much as I do like him as a very serviceable backup, if Ville Husso goes down for a couple of weeks or a month at a time, they are going to also need to leapfrog all these other teams who have improved in the Atlantic, and we haven't even spoken about the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Tampa Bay Lightning yet.
You know what? That just reminded me. I was going to ask you at the top of the show because you are out in Ontario, correct?
I'm a Toronto boy.
Okay, so we're going to change gears quickly. Did you like the Austin Matthews signing 4 years at 13.25?
Like, on the surface, of course, the homer in me, the Leafs bleed blue. It's exciting to get your guy back for 4 years, but it's like you look around the rest of the NHL and everyone's signing 7, 8, and 9-year extensions, to their big pieces.
Yeah.
And I know the cap's coming and a lot of 1-year deals got handed out over this offseason. I'm just disappointed that he's not willing to commit long-term. Does he deserve that right? Has he earned that right to take a shorter-term deal? 100%, so I don't fault the player here at all. This is also a front office that's been in flux. So my long answer, really long, is that I do like it. I'm just honestly, as a Leafs fan, I'm a very realistic one. I think the Leafs have the potential to be really good, but it's going to be a boom or bust situation for this team this year.
Okay, so I kind of view it the same way. I thought that it didn't feel like a win for me for the Maple Leafs to sign a 4-year deal for Austin Matthews. I appreciate what you're saying. As a player, he wants to sign a 4-year deal, and then when the cap goes up significantly, sign another big deal. That's fine. I get it. But Bruce, what did you think of the deal?
I kind of think of it the same way. I kind of look at it. Matthews is kind of taking a look at the way the NBA players do their deals. That's how they do theirs. They take a look at when the cap is going to go up and then they'll sign 1 or 2 years, and then after those 2 years are up, then they get that big bump. I think that's what Matthews is doing, the same thing. Hopefully, just the Leafs can manage their cap a little bit better than they have in the past, because they still got Willie to sign yet, and there's not a lot of cap space left there to do anything.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get back on the Detroit Red Wings here. I had to pick your brain there, Flip, about that one. So I think Ville Husso, I think he's going to have a better season this year, and I've got him, like you said, taking over the Nets. It's going to be his to lose. 65-35 split. Does that make sense percentage-wise?
I want to say that they probably want it to be even more in favor of Ville Husso, but that probably makes sense given that we also haven't seen a season. He's played 3 quote-unquote full seasons in the NHL.
Yeah.
Never cracking more than 55 games, so maybe there's a concern about burning a guy out who's never been there. But I want to say they want this guy playing, right around that 60 start number. But we'll see, right? Like, this is the biggest question mark for me with this team. And I know the back end has some holes. The blue line in specific. It comes down to this goaltending duo. James Reimer is a perennial backup. Ville Husso has a very limited track record, flashes of brilliance at time with the St. Louis Blues. He was really good at times last year for the Red Wings as well. The team got a whole lot better in front of him, and I think that means success in the standings. So I think what you're saying all kind of checks out. I'm just really wary of this goalie. And I had this goalie last year for most of the year.
Yeah.
He's just, again, he's kind of that guy that hasn't really taken the reins fully as a number one. Let's see if he can do it this year. I don't know.
I think so many of us still have that picture of him as a St. Louis Blue and his 930 whatever save percentage a couple seasons ago, and then you forget that's not been the case recently here. So,
right,
I guess
right.
We'll see.
Yeah, he was 7th in Vezina voting that year.
Yeah, he was incredible. I want to talk about the defense here quickly. So, from my perspective, I've kind of got a bit of a galaxy brain idea here too, but the only reason to me that you bring Shane Gostisbehere in is to run your power play. Like he's not a defensive stalwart. You bring him in for a 1-year deal. I noticed that Moritz Seider's contract, he's in year 3 of his entry-level deal. So he's going to become an RFA this summer. My harebrained idea is that you brought in Gostisbehere to keep Seider's value down, to run your power play, keep Seider's value down for contract negotiations because he's going to be limited in power play time. Next summer, Gostisbehere's gone. Seider can run your power play. You sign him to a cheaper deal. What do you think?
I actually don't hate that take at all. And I think, Moritz Seider's kind of has played himself out of big money in a certain aspect. And I mean mega dollars, because this is a guy that I was ready to throw out there and tell you to, put the farm on this guy as the Norris. I was like ready to anoint him as the next best thing ever. And he's only he's 21 years old, not even, I'm looking this up now. So he's 22 years old now. So there's going to be growing pains. But your take on Gostisbehere, I think, is spot on in terms of his ability to run the power play, because we also know this team was very mediocre on special teams, and I mean PK and PP.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just brought this up just right now, overall goal scoring, they scored less goals than the New York Islanders last year and the Calgary Flames. They were right at the bottom of the barrel in terms of offense.
Yeah.
So I think Gostisbehere is in a really interesting point in his career. And you come into this situation on Detroit where you don't have to be the number one guy. You don't have to be the number two guy. You might actually get deployed on the third pairing, which I know a lot of websites out there have him now playing with Justin Hall. But they also bring in Justin Hall. They bring in Jeff Petrie. You have Ben Sherratt there. You need some offense on that back end. And I think Gostisbehere actually might be a really excellent fit to just go out there and do his offensive thing, because he doesn't have to worry about being that number one or even number 2 or number 3 guy on this blue line.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Makes sense.
And the projection for us is 17 goals and 51 points for Gostisbehere. Just assuming he gets power play one time and plays about 22 minutes a game.
Yeah, and you know what? If this team does have success and DeBrincat goes off up front, and that top line that I expect to really play nicely together, and Raymond, Larkin, and DeBrincat, I think that means maybe even more peripheral assists from Gostisbehere firing that puck around on the power play. Who knows? That's just one of those things that they go on a heater, they go on a 7-8 game winning streak, and the offense starts to pop. That number for him, I could see it definitely going higher. Do I want to bank on that? Absolutely not. But I could very much see it happen.
Okay. Alex DeBrincat, we've talked about him a little bit on this show this summer. Looking at all the underlying luck metrics, I won't go through all of them in the interest of time here, but he really should have a bounce-back season. I think playing with Larkin and playing with Lucas Raymond, our projection is 40 goals and 80 points. Does that seem reasonable for Alex DeBrincat in Detroit?
Yeah, why not? I think what I've heard a lot from people is, don't forget a couple of years of those inflated numbers in Chicago getting to play with Patrick Kane. I'm not here for that take anymore, because he is more than good enough. And Raymond, Larkin, some of these other pieces in the top 6, I love that veteran presence of a guy like David Perron. Mm-hmm. They have Andrew Kopp up the middle, JT Compher up the middle, Daniel Sprong now in the mix. This is going to be a tough club to play against. So I think that allows these players who are purely offensive, like Gostisbehere and DeBrincat, to do their thing. So I'm fully here for the bounce-back season. Also, bounce-back season, he still did almost scrape 30 goals together last year and almost 70 points. So If we're bouncing back from that, I most definitely want to have my eye on DeBrincat, because we know he's got 40-goal caliber.
Yeah, I think he's there all day. But for anyone that's listening and you want more information on that, I've broken down all of his luck metrics. I'll put that up in the blog post. You can go through it. Lucas Raymond, just quickly, 23 goals, 62 points. I do expect to bounce back from him. What do you think of the projection?
Yeah, tough. because again, I keep mentioning sample size, and I don't mean to be a broken record, but when you're looking at a guy who has 156 games played under his belt, I'm just a little bit wary of banking on too much too soon. He was fourth in Calder voting just 2 years ago. 45 points, obviously, after 57 the year before. That's a huge disappointment. He's got to be having a bounce back. The Brinkhead in there, all these guys they bring in to balance out the attack. It just makes so much sense that you bank on these players with situations around them improving to also improve. This isn't a bold take and this isn't rocket science. This is how you got to be positioning yourself for this upcoming draft.
One thing I found interesting about Lucas Raymond, 44.4 offensive zone start percentage. That was the third lowest among Red Wings forwards last season. I think that's going to change. It needs to change. Like, I don't understand. And I think he actually held his head above water in that deployment against quality competition. But he needs more offensive zone start time, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
He also, I think, needs to, again, I'm sounding like a broken record with these guys, but he needs to shoot that biscuit a lot more as well. 134 shots for a guy who I think he has a very underrated shot, and at 5'11", you're going to have to make some of these things really work for you because you're not exactly creating chances with your body per se. So you've got to be elite with some of these other skills. So I say he throws that puck on net a whole lot more, and you'll see that number go up. But let's also just remember in terms of where you're drafting him, 62 hits in his first year. I like it. That number goes down to 43. The shots go down. Let's see what he has in the barrel for the start of the year, because I do think he gets that run out on the top line. But given that they do have players like, they have Berggren down there, Robbie Fabry has had injuries. All I'm saying is Dylan Larkin and DeBrincat are not getting separated. So if that line struggles, it's going to be Raymond getting bumped off of it, and then I'm really concerned about where those numbers head.
Valid point, for sure. All right, let's move on to the Florida Panthers here, and we'll try and get through these guys quickly. Flip, thanks for your time here.
No problem.
So Florida, 42, 32, and 8. They're fourth in the Central. Goals for at 3.51 was sixth. Goals against at 3.32 was 12th. Special teams here, 22.83 was 10th on the power play, and 75.95% on the penalty kill was 23rd. They've got 8 back-to-back sets this season, tied for the second fewest with Calgary, Colorado, and Winnipeg. 33% of the games are played on light days, tied for the 8th fewest. They brought in Evan Rodriguez, Dmitry Kulikov, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Anthony Stolars. Key departures, Radko Gudas, Mark Stahl, and Alex Lyon. Obviously dealing with some injuries on defense, why they brought in OEL. Did this team improve, stay the same, or what's your take on this, Flip?
I think this is one of those ones where I want to say stay the same for the most part. I think the key pieces are all still there for them. Brandon Montour, I know, has been banged up. He had a huge stepping out season. I think that their blue line is actually still their strength when they are fully healthy. And I know that's a bit of a bold take considering they have a very nicely balanced top 6 forward group. And, Luosterainen, Anton Lundell, I really love that combination on the third line. One of my favorite players is Carter Verhaeghe, and I'll give you that take in a second. I think they stayed the same. I think also, given the improvements around them in the division and now that target being on their back, they just ran all the way to the Stanley Cup and embarrassed a few Eastern Conference juggernauts in the process. So when I'm telling you about guys taking names and numbers, this Florida Panthers team also has the sass and swagger of their captain in Matthew Tkachuk. And trust me, the Bruins, the Leafs, and all those other teams that they showed up a little bit at the end of the year and in the postseason are going to be coming for blood. And I don't know if Sergei Bobrovsky can run back that magic like he did last year.
Okay, so let's start there, because that was one question I had for you was Sergei Bobrovsky. Bruce, I know we've talked about him lots during the regular season. Tyler's pulled his hair out at times drafting that player. He had just he did Bob things, right? So he was 24, 20, and 3 with a 3.07 goals against average and 902 save percentage. But in 15 games from April 26th to June 8th, 12-3-0 record with a 2.26 goals against average and a 931 save percentage. Yeah. He led all NHL netminders in goals saved above expected at 16.3, according to Money Puck. He was lights out in the playoffs. Now, they didn't play so well in the Stanley Cup final, right? 1-4-0 record, a 470 goals against average, and an 844 save percentage. So he really struggled against Vegas. But my question, did any of that postseason play change your perspective on Bobrovsky for next season on what should still be a good Florida Panthers team.
Good Florida Panthers team, and let's not forget how much money this team still has invested into Bobrovsky. He will be getting the run out no matter what happens next year. They will not be going to Anthony Stolarz as any kind of that must be emergency, dire straits. Bobrovsky busted both knees and he's out. Because no hate on Anthony Stolarz. He is a perennial second or third stringer even on better teams, and this is Bob's net. So that's one thing that I actually don't mind drafting this goalie for that fact alone. He's going to get the run out. He's going to get the run out for a majority of the starts. But one of the things that I really appreciate that you brought up is certain GMs, when they go into the draft season, all they remember is the end of the year, right? They remember a player or a team burning their squad in the playoffs. Hashtag I'm a crying Leafs fan. And then you draft a guy too high in Bobrovsky that he stood on his head in most of the playoffs. And yeah, the Stanley Cup, I think he just ran out of steam. He saw a lot of leather. He saw a lot of rubber. I'll leave it with this. Very valuable still because of the run out. You mentioned the team is still good ahead of him. I'm just really concerned about another injury to a guy who at 34 years old has a lot of mileage on this body, 640 plus regular season games, seeming like he's been in the NHL for forever. You know, he's been in the NHL for over 12 seasons now. So I'll leave it with this. I'm okay drafting him, but it's got to be in the right round. And I'm saying like it's got to be maybe 8th or 9th or even later.
Totally fair. Bruce, what do you think of Bobrovsky? Were you drafting him this year, or if at all?
I probably won't draft him at all. I don't like his ups and his downs. It just
good point.
It just scares me. And the other thing is Spencer Knight is back now. So what is Knight going to have to say about all this too? He's back from his stint with the player assistance program. So he signed for 3 years at $4.5 million. He's going to come into effect here too. So
yeah, that's actually a really good angle to take, Bruce. And I think my concern there is off ice issues are so hard to handicap. Not like injuries are easy. I would never, ever make light of someone in a substance abuse program or someone going through the program. That's not what we're here to do. I'm just wary about putting money in my pocket, and I would be not expecting Spencer Knight to make any kind of impact at the NHL level this year. But that's just because I don't know what's going on with the situation, because he does have all the talent in the world to be a solid goalie. I just think Bob, given how much they're invested in him financially, and we could see what he can do when he is on his game. He is elite when he's feeling it. Let's see what happens in front of him this year, because if that blue line is as banged up as it was to end the year last year, then maybe we're going to have to take another look at Bobrovsky, and that's probably where I would say do your research first and see what's going on that blue line ahead of your draft.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's head there quickly then. You'd mentioned Brandon Montour and how well he did last year. Can we expect more of the same? We've got him projected for 16 goals and 66 points. I mean, he's going to be banged up again coming into the season too, so he's going to miss some time. Ekblad's going to miss some time. But I'm assuming you still like the player for next season.
I do like the player, and it's just this is one of those things that you really have to put all of the stats over his career kind of aside, because when you're looking at him, you know, aside from maybe bringing some hits and some blocks value, you know, he's topping out at, 30 points, I believe was a career high for him. So 76 points is just such a huge stepping out that I would be actually more comfortable projecting him in between 50 and 60 than 60 plus. But that's only because of the injuries. We really, again, there's some question marks floating around this Florida Panthers team. And that's where my concern lies. Him healthy, if he was coming into this season healthy after what we saw last year, and for him in the postseason, because he was still very effective in the postseason as well, I'd be fine with your projection. And it's not far off, Devin. And I just think the injuries and maybe some of those question marks, your concerns, Bruce, with Bob, maybe those plus minus numbers get a little wonky. I'm going to say it's not far off, but I'm maybe going to let him slide a slight bit in this upcoming draft.
Okay, totally fair. Aaron Ekblad, I think probably if he can be healthy and productive, I could see we've got 17 goals and 54 points here. Should we expect a little bit of a bounce back for Aaron Ekblad? And part of why I like him, I think, is because so many fantasy managers are going to be down on him because he's lost that top power play role to Montour. So I think it's an opportunity to really get Ekblad at a discount this year. And if all goes well, maybe he still does put up 15 to 17 goals and 50 plus points.
it's most definitely within his skill set and his ability. This is a guy 2 years off of finishing top six for the Norris, plus 38 and 57 points only a year previous. I'm not ready to write off Ekblad just yet because he still passes the eye test when he's healthy. He is the prototypical defenseman that you want out there. He does a little bit of everything. He plays with sandpaper at times. He's a leader. I know those aren't exactly tangible assets to your fantasy team, but how about 80 block shots last year, 77 hits? Those are. So is 216 shots on net. And I think that's where I like to tie it to your prediction for a comeback. He was starting to get his confidence back, and it all boils down to health with this guy, because when he's healthy, he's elite. When he's banged up, which has been far more often than not lately, he is a huge liability. And actually, I had a few of my friends go high on Aaron Ekblad last year because of a really good year, and his injury factors burn you. And it's the kind of guy, because of his name and caliber, you probably taken him pretty high and probably passed on a number of other guys, like what Ekblad topped out with 38 points last year. Bet you there was a lot of guys in and around where he was being drafted that would have put your team over the top.
For sure. No question there. You mentioned Carter Verhaeghe. So do you have kind of a take on, you said you like the player. We've got him here, 40 goals and 73 points. I think the power play share is going to be a bit of a concern. He put up 73 points and 42 goals last year. He saw just 38.2% power play share. So I like the player, especially if I can get him at the right price point. And I think he's 40 goals and 70 plus points is for sure in the ballpark.
He's got one of the best shots in the game, and he's starting to garner the attention and the respect that brings with it. I was lucky enough to watch Carter Verhaeghe. So I've moved down to the Niagara region a couple of years ago. I'm from Toronto, but I live down in Niagara. He's a good Niagara Ice Dog product. This is a team in the OHL that's been cranking out elite talent. Jason Robertson being another one. Alex Pietrangelo a number of years ago. There's some really good players coming out of Niagara. And when I see Carter Verhaeghe, it's just more of the same. And he is underrated. And I know now he's on the radar. There's not a ton of 40-goal scorers out there with this shot that he has. He also has some really good chemistry with Matthew Tkachuk. And Matthew Tkachuk is one of the best fantasy pieces that you could have on your team. He is a top 5 draft pick, in my opinion. After Leon Draisaitl and McDavid, of course, there's the McKinnons and Matthews. Matthew Tkachuk is right there, in my opinion, as a top draft pick for this upcoming year. And that means Carter Verhaeghe is going to get some of that love too. And I'm right there with you, though. I appreciate your point on the timeshare on the power play. 42 goals last year. He's going to get 40 again this year. So I think he's right in there in that realm of 65 to 75 points. I just think the ceiling is continuing to be high with him. I understand, 28 years old. He's, at maybe the back end of his prime. I love this player. These are a couple of guys that I just stick by because I've loved them. He made me look real good last year, and I'm going to continue to go back to the well with a guy who can really shoot that puck.
Yeah, 11.8 shots on goal per 60. That's good enough for 14th league-wide at all strengths last year. So
there you go.
You love that. That makes a big difference. 40 goals in his sleep. You mentioned Matthew Tkachuk. Bruce, we talked about him last year. I think I'm on record saying there's absolutely no way he's going to improve on his then career high of 104 points that he put up the Calgary Flames. He made me look silly. He made a lot of people look silly when he just absolutely crushed it again, right?
Me too.
109 points in 3 fewer games. Like, the guy just continues to crush it.
He fills out all the categories. He's a gamer. He really, he's the kind of guy that you have 4 or 5 jerseys of him if he's on your team, and he's the kind of guy that you might want to burn 4 or 5 jerseys if he's on your opponent team. So I kind of tend to love a player like that. He puts his money where his mouth is for the most part. He's an agitator, but look at what he did for this Florida Panthers team down the stretch and in the playoffs. The swagger from the entire lineup ran through him. The confidence for the entire lineup ran through him. He carried that team at times. Is it a bit bold to expect him to up it once again? For sure. But 100 points, very much in his realm.
Yeah, we may be taking the bold take here with 40 goals and 112 points. Now, again, it's health dependent, right? We don't know where he's going to come into this season. Right. It was his sternum, I think, right?
Yep. Yeah, it was a serious injury.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's obviously going to play a factor here. We'll see what happens. I was really impressed to see, he never exceeded 9.6 shots on goal per 60 in his first 5 NHL seasons. And then in 2021, 2022, 10.3 shots on goal. Last year, 12 shots on goal per 60. So he was 9th league wide. Like that, to me, that's really interesting, and it plays a big factor in me drafting this player next year.
Most definitely. You said you predict 112 for him this year. Is that what you said?
We got 112. Yeah. And I mean,
yeah, it's, it's so not out of the world of possibility. It's not even close. It's very possible. It's possible he even has more if he stays healthy. But I guess, what does his off-season preparation look like? Was there a couple of weeks where he maybe wasn't able to be on the ice, getting that shape going? Maybe that means a slow start. And given how many points we're projecting, a slow start could immediately put him behind that number. But he's good enough, and his fantasy value is not just in points. I know the hits are not exactly where they were over the last number of years. The hits were down last year. Penalty minutes are still very much there. Oh my goodness, they almost doubled. The shots are there, and I really do think he's a bona fide first round draft pick, and I could even see him going in the 5th, 6th, or 7th slot.
All right, perfect. Well, Flip, we've occupied enough of your time today. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you about these early way too early predictions for 2023.
I got them right here, ready to go.
Okay, so who is going to win the Atlantic Division next season?
All this preamble I gave about me being uncertain about the Toronto Maple Leafs, I just have to be honest. When I look at that division, aside from the historically good Bruins last year, the Leafs were by and far the best team in the division. So if I'm predicting the Boston Bruins to take a major step back, by default, yeah, of course, Tampa Bay are going to be a force to be reckoned with. People seem to be sleeping on Tampa Bay and their value. I think that is a huge mistake. They are still very capable of winning a Stanley Cup. So they should be right there on the doorstep. But I'm going Maple Leafs, and I'm going to keep it at that because now that you have Matthews under contract, that at least is now aside. You have William Nylander coming out saying he very much wants to be a part of this team. Take it with a grain of salt, if you will, but it's starting to look like these things are aligning. Tyler Bertuzzi makes this team immediately better. John Klingberg, a very risky boom or bust situation. So this is what I mean. You're either going to see an absolute sensational regular season from this Leafs team, or I'm telling you, they might be battling for a playoff spot.
Interesting. All right. Who wins the Stanley Cup then next season?
I think you guys will like this one. And I've been bouncing around this team for the last couple of years, and I think they finally get it done because they now have a legitimate number one goalie in Stuart Skinner. And my pick is the Edmonton Oilers for the Stanley Cup. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are almost good enough on their own to win themselves a Stanley Cup. Now you have Evan Bouchard stepping out. I like Darnell Nurse's ability to bring that physicality. Will the bottom six be able to balance out the attack? They bring in Connor Brown, which is one of those, I think you guys can attest to this. There's one of those or two or three of those sexy names about, a big opportunity for a fantasy piece headed into the year. Everyone's talking about Connor Brown. Is he going to play with McDavid? Is he going to play with Draisaitl? I think this team is more than good enough. They've been right there knocking on the door. Oilers are my pick for the cup at this point in time.
I love it. Who wins the Rocket Richard Trophy?
Well, I've just been talking about the boys in blue and white, and I think when I looked at that list, Pasternak's there, Mikko Rantanen's there. Obviously, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are the 1 and 2 favorites for a good reason. But I'm going to go with the value at plus 550 with Austin Matthews. We know he has all the skill in the world. He had a down year last year, and he still put up over 40 goals. This guy has 60-plus goal caliber all day long, and I think you're going to see a really big bounce back year from Matthews because he's been hearing the doubters, and I think he's going to shut them up in a very big way.
Okay, cool. Who wins the Art Ross Trophy?
Let's keep this one very simple. It's got to be McDavid, but it's going to be right there at Draisaitl. I was lucky enough to see McDavid play a couple of times in Toronto, and I was actually there 2 or 3 seasons ago when he took Morgan Riley's jockstrap out of his pants and put it in the rafters. I watched that from behind the net, and if there is any doubt that Connor McDavid has all the ability to be the best player that ever played this game. I'm not talking about the most decorated. I'm not talking about better than Wayne Gretzky, but in terms of his skills and skating ability, he is the best player to ever touch the ice surface. And I didn't watch Guy Lafleur. I didn't watch some of the greats, but Connor McDavid is the best hockey player to ever play in the NHL. And I'm not saying he is the greatest, but he is the best, and he takes the Art Ross this year.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
Definitely. Thank you.
Who wins the Norris Trophy?
This one I think you guys are going to like, and I've gone a little bit off the board here because I think it's clear and fair that Cale Makar is at plus 240, the favorite, betting odd favorite as well. Adam Fox is right there behind him at plus 650, and Rasmus Dahlin is actually the third favorite at plus 750, along with my pick, Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars, gets to play in front of one of the best goalies in the league that makes him look really good in Jake Ottinger. Miro Heiskanen steps out this year as a major fantasy stud, and I mean even better than he has been. Keep your eyes on Miro Heiskanen. I have a big season in prediction for him, and at plus 750, he's getting 20 or 30 of my dollars, 100%. He will be a finalist for this trophy.
Yeah, no, I can see that, no question. All right, let's talk about the Vezina Trophy. Who's taking it home?
Okay, so this is my favorite goalie all day. I drafted him a little bit too early last year. He is just that good. I'll ream off the stats very quickly in terms of odds. There are actually, that's a lie. There's 5 goalies all tied as the favorite to take home this trophy, and that's UC Saros, Connor Hellebuck, Andrei Vasilevsky, Igor Shesterkin, and my pick, Ilya Sorokin. I love Sorokin's game. I think if he's on any other spot other than, the media vacuum that is Long Island, he is a much bigger star. He has the unfortunate, tendency to have to carry that team. They really go blank on him. I think they leave him out to dry far too much. He is definitely at plus 600, very, very much going to be in the mix for this trophy, and he's my favorite pick headed into the season.
Okay. Perfect. And then the Calder Trophy. It's going to be a really interesting Calder Trophy race this year. Obviously, Connor Bedard is the obvious answer, but
yeah,
I wonder about a guy like Adam Fantilli. Like, what happens if Bedard goes down and Fantilli is playing with some talented players in Columbus this year? Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's something like what we saw with Landeskog and Nugent Hopkins, where if a guy doesn't play a full season, maybe the other guy has an opportunity to step up and win it. What do you think?
I actually think that this is the most value to be had out of any of the awards if you are sprinkling a couple of bucks ahead of the season, because you look at these odds, and yes, we're not here to take any bold, crazy takes to say Connor Bedard should not be the clear and away favorite here. That makes a whole lot of sense. Chicago Blackhawks are going to be real bad, and losing and scoring 8 goals in the W is a lot of a difference, and that can have an effect on a young guy's psyche. Do I think he's still an absolute star and he will probably run away with this one? That makes a lot of sense. But it also makes a whole lot of sense. Don't forget about Luke Hughes. He gets to go and play on the New Jersey Devils. They're going to be in the mix for a cup. So I'm just trying to take a look at some of these situations and get your betting value, because the last one that I would take a look at, and I already mentioned it, Devin Levi and the Buffalo Sabres, if the Sabres are a playoff team, Devin Levi at plus 2,000, who is the, Matt Nyes and Shane Wright are also at plus 2,000. I'm loving a 5 or a 10er on Devin Levi because, like I said, that Buffalo Sabres team, it's just a much better situation than Connor Bedard going to Chicago, who, they maybe win 20, 25 games this year? That's going to be tough.
Yeah. Okay, so Devin Levi's your pick then.
I'm going with Devin Levi for the juice, for the value.
For the juice. That makes sense, totally. Okay. Flip, thanks so much for being here, man. I really appreciate your time. Anything else you want to mention before we take off today?
No, I think I need a water. Might need a dip in the lake. It's a little hot in here. So, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Okay, thanks for being here. Enjoy the season. Good luck with everything, and we'll for sure stay in touch. You mentioned Michael Amato, your good friend Michael Amato. He is going to be joining us on our episode next week, so we're looking forward to talking to him about, I think, part 2 of the Atlantics. We'll get into the Ottawa Senators and a few teams we didn't talk about here today. So, Okay, with that, we'll head out. For our listeners, if you want to follow us on Twitter, X, whatever, at FH Hacks. We're also on Threads at Fantasy Hockey Hacks, Instagram, Fantasy Hockey Hacks, and check out the website, fantasyhockeyhacks.com. Take care.